Good morning. It's good to see you all. I'm glad we can come together for this exploration of the Dharma. And I also want to make special thanks to those who took the initiative to move chairs to get closer. Yes?
We wish we could sit on cushions, but our knees won't let us anymore.
I sympathize with that, and I'm glad that you took the initiative to come closer. I've even thought just along on this is ruminations on the topic of the importance of kind of intimacy and closeness in the community, thinking that perhaps one side of our cushions should be chairs and the other side should be cushions, so that people and chairs and cushions actually can be more or less in the same place of their choosing and not in a place that is defined by what's left over. So I was just, since you moved up, I was just reminded of this, but that's my wish in any case, that all of you have a place where you feel like you actually are at home sitting, whether it's in the front row or hiding in the back row. And it's perfectly fine to want to hide. It's fine. So, well, we're here to look into Guru Yoga today. All of those who came for the opportunity to enjoy flower arrangements get a bonus, because you get the Guru Yoga along with the opportunity to soak in the joy of the offering of the flower arrangements and the new stands that have been very beautifully created as an ornament of offering. Very nice sense to that. So let's begin by reading a few prayers and sitting just a little bit. We'll do the refuge for those who have this. We'll do the refuge in bodhicitta for those who don't. Yes, Mahamudra. Yes, please. That would be good. But I'll just, Phil, Linda's getting some from the back here. Sure. But we'll do the refuge and the mandala offering. And we'll do the refuge, and then we'll just recite a few Vajrasattva mantras, just kind of in the spirit of what we're doing today. The refuge, a few Vajrasattva mantras, the prayer to turn the wheel of the Dharma. And then, because we're going to go into it in more depth later, we won't recite the Doje Changtuma, so we'll just sit at that spot for a moment. Yes, coming attractions. Yeah. Bringing to mind connection with sentient beings filling space, keeping in mind both the vastness of this web of connectivity as well as the very particular aspects of it. All the different beings, all the beings we know and don't know. And also bringing to mind our connection to the awakened ones, a connection that transcends space and time, if for no other reason than our own awakened nature is right here and right now. So bringing to mind the refuge in all sentient beings, we'll recite together in English. In the Buddha, Dharma, and the Supreme Assembly, I take refuge until enlightenment. Through the merit of generosity and other perfections, may I accomplish Buddhahood for the benefit of beings. In the Buddha, Dharma, and the Supreme Assembly, I take refuge until enlightenment. Through the merit of generosity and other perfections, may I accomplish Buddhahood for the benefit of beings. In the Buddha, Dharma, and the Supreme Assembly, I take refuge until enlightenment. Through the merit of generosity and other perfections, may I accomplish Buddhahood for the benefit of beings. And just sit with that for a moment. And then we can recite the Vajrasattva mantra. For those who know the long mantra, please feel free. For those who don't know the mantra, just Om Vajrasattva Om. Om Vajrasattva Om. So we'll just recite this in the spirit of letting go of all habits and patterns and allowing ourselves to be filled with the purity of the Buddhas, Bodhisattvas. Om Vajrasattva Samaya Manapala Vajrasattva Devena Vajrasattva. Om Vajrasattva Om. Let go and rest. And then bringing to mind offering of the mandala, offering of the entire universe, all things that you know, all things you can imagine, all positive qualities and resources, all offered to the awakened ones, to our root teachers. So bringing to mind a sense of this vastness collected in front of you and the presence of all the awakened ones. However you imagine this presence, it's fine. If you know the details of the visualization, good too. So the base is anointed with scented water and strewn with flowers, adorned with the supreme mountain, the four continents, and the sun and moon. Through this offering, conceived as a Buddha field, may all beings enjoy the pure realms. And so recite this a few times, either in Tibetan or in English, as you're familiar. Again, let go and rest for a moment. And then the prayer to turn the wheel of the Dharma. It's page 5. I pray that the Dharma wheel of the Mahayana, Hinayana, and the teachings common to both be turned in accordance with the wishes and aptitudes of beings. Take a moment to fervently wish that for all beings, that each receive whatever inspiration, teaching, example will be useful for them in whatever circumstance they are. That all the awakened ones and all teachers of all kinds will meet the needs of these beings. Allowing this wish to just open, rest in the essence. Thank you. I always appreciate the opportunity that you give me by showing up to focus my mind and bring my attention to review things that are important, that are core to the practice, without which I can see my mind might lapse into a vague and hazy relationship with the material. So it's the sincerity that I thank you for, in a certain way, just making me accountable to myself. Thank you. So today, the center of our attention is the Guru Yoga practice. You could say Guru Yoga in general, but in particular the Guru Yoga practice of the Karma Kagyu. And let's see, of people here, who has done this practice before? A few people have never done the Guru Yoga? Never? Okay. Never. So I see somebody who is trying to be modest about whether or not he's done it, but you're familiar with it a little bit? Just a little.
Isn't the Guru Yoga spread throughout a lot of our practices?
What's that?
Isn't Guru Yoga spread throughout many of our practices?
The flavor of Guru Yoga, you're correct. The flavor of Guru Yoga is spread throughout, you could say, every molecule of the Vajrayana in some way. But I was just particularly interested about how many people are familiar with the Karma Kagyu Londo and have seen it and tested it a little bit. That it makes some difference in what and how to decide what to say and what not to say. Or that doesn't sound right. It's more like how to make space to say things that might be useful. That's
Bill, can I just check in?
Sure.
Are we streaming?
We are.
I'm asking.
We are.
We are. So if anyone wants to ask things of Bill, I'll pass the microphone to you, okay? So people
or if
can
it's
know
just a
things
quick thing, I'll at least try to fake the context.
Okay, right.
As opposed to just say yes to something very significant. The Londo practices they're such an interesting set of things to do, particularly for those of us who approach them from this kind of, you could say, this naive perspective. We're just dropped in with our naive expectations about what Buddhism is about and how practice goes, and our notions that calm abiding is a beginning point in practice, things like that. And it's worth acknowledging that our assumptions about these things are not just sort of the way things are. Just for starters, calm abiding, which is about the first thing you will hear from anybody, apart from a general acknowledgement of the importance of refuge and bodhicitta. But calm abiding was considered an advanced practice. And if you really look at it, you can understand that. It may be easy enough to understand the idea when you're 3 years old about how to ride a bicycle. You've sort of seen people do it, but then you get on and it's an entirely different matter. In the context of the way these practices were taught, Wendro was considered the introductory practice. And so it's worth just kind of, not necessarily, I wouldn't suggest that we, oh, well, see, you're wrong, this is right, abandon that perspective, take up this one, but just to acknowledge that, oh, there's something here that could be looked at in this way, something about these practices that would actually provide the foundation in the kind of the inner kind of spiritual strength and capacity to actually be able to engage in the practices of calm abiding and insight with more clarity and more coherence and more energy and focus. And certainly the contemplations of the four thoughts, which are considered part of the foundations, it's easy, after we've had the honeymoon period with calm abiding, and then it turns out to be difficult, boring, or the whatever condition that drove us to the Dharma momentarily kind of turns out to be okay. Then we kind of find that we're not really doing it, or just kind of sitting there, as Eric would say, in our meditation coma. Something like the four thoughts really does provide a reason, kind of some clarity. It does make us stop, and it's a kind of a timeout. Stop. Let's go back to let's understand the basic conditions that we're in. Let's really take stock of our life. Let's take stock of the rarity of the opportunities that we have, the ephemeral character of it, that it's impermanent. Take stock, be clear-minded about what kind of conditions, what kinds of causes and conditions are we truly putting in place? Sort of like time for a little self-honesty. What are we actually doing? Are we taking advantage of this impermanent and rather remarkable possibility and potential that we have? And then to examine the character of this existence that we find ourselves in, with all the ways that suffering and confusion arise and sustain themselves. We actually have to be clear-minded in order to sustain practice. We might find somebody out way in the corner of the bell curve who somehow, just by karma, manages to have this clarity and one-pointed enthusiasm and focus, and just naturally slides into shamatha at the drop of a hat. And it's always kind of the first choice in any moment is to be present with exactly what's arising and look into the nature of experience. That's rare. For the rest of us mortals, ordinary beings, we have to work at it. We have to work at it. And in the same way, the whole series of the Wendro practices, we can look at in the same way. How do we build the habit of mind and the kind of the inner strength and orientation so that we actually will track what's important, so that we will be able to actually look deeper, so that we'll be able to be, you could say, more honest with ourselves. So just to go through them in order, from the perspective of the refuge and bodhicitta, to really keep in mind what's important and what the potential is. And from the point of view of Vajrasattva practice, one way we can, this is sort of extemporaneous contemplation. You can all do exactly the same thing and look and see. But to be in Vajrasattva practice, there is an element of real honesty that we have to have about ourselves and kind of start to look, see what am I really hanging on to that is not helpful to hang on to. How can I just let go of that? And in turn, how can I instead rely upon that potential? When we fill ourselves with the nectar, it's not merely "thou shalt not." It's there are all kinds of things that you would be better off not, and all those things we let go of. But within the Vajrasattva practice, there's also the kind of the center of gravity is really identifying with being filled with this positive potential, with the actual energy of the bodhisattvas, which can get us out of the frame of mind of, oh, I just can't seem to get rid of this or that or the other thing. Never mind. Just let go of even the struggle of trying to get rid of it and fill yourself with the nectar of the bodhisattvas. Just fill yourself. So it's a way to step out. In the mandala practice, originally one of my all-time least favorite and most confusing of the Ngondro practices, I have started to appreciate even that, I could say, kind of, even that. But it was only when I really started to place kind of the perspective of the vastness of bodhisattva activity and the vast, beyond speakable potential of enlightened, awakened mind. When I began to just have some inkling of that, then this notion of offering everything of beauty, all positive qualities, any possible resource that anybody could imagine, that I could imagine, to offer this holding on to any of that is lesser than finding awakening. So the vastness of that, to actually be able to step into something, it's not merely kind of toning down my confusion du jour and my current carping whine, whatever I'm bothered by today. If only I could get rid of that, I really wouldn't need the Dharma. That's something much vaster than that. And so the mandala practice. Now we're on to Guru Yoga. And if we take this sense of orientation, the sense of letting go and orienting more towards the natural purity of mind, appreciating the vastness of this and the connection with letting go of all the things, all the levels at which we hold on to something, whether it's possessions or even a sense of stability, of understanding and holding on to kind of a sense of permanence and orderliness of our you could say our personal ideology of the universe, letting go. But then if we think of enlightenment and we talk about it always kind of in the third person and enlightenment, then we say, who, me? Oh, I'm sure for somebody else this is possible. Me? Me? There is a way in which Guru Yoga, amongst many other things, it answers the question, absolutely. Yes, you. And it shifts us from thinking of enlightenment from being just out there someplace for somebody else and only for the people who sit in the reserve section of the karmic orchestra. You know, they come. There's just the reserved ones. We're just the standing room only wannabe bodhisattvas. Couldn't possibly happen for us. But being able to actually shift, and this is a critical shift in outlook if we do want to either proceed deeply with calm abiding and insight, or go on to Yidam practice, where one of the key elements is what's called pride of the deity, this kind of confidence that I don't need to kind of look at everything from the perspective of my ordinary little jail of karmic propensities. I don't sit there rattling the bars and banging my cup back and forth, my little contained karmic jail. That instead just to identify as the bodhisattva, actually just to the point where the pride of the deity, I think it was Rungutuku said, pride of the deity is really when it's not like I am the bodhisattva. It's when that frame of reference in your practice is the frame of reference. It's not I'm trying to be the bodhisattva. It's I'm one-pointedly settled in this perspective. So moving into that kind of frame of reference, moving into that, the confidence, and even if it's just a matter, just edit that, let's start over again. If we are doing calm abiding in insight practice, we also, at some point, really need to step outside of this notion of I of limited capacity am trying to do something impossible. We actually need to step outside of that. And particularly, I heard this directly from the previous Jamgon Control Rinpoche. That devotion from the point of within the Karma Kagyu and others, but within the Karma Kagyu, devotion is the door. And we can talk about the funniness of the word devotion, but that sense of kind of connection, kind of open-heartedness and connection and appreciation and inspiration, kind of the animating quality of that is the door that allows us to feel like we kind of, it's possible. It's possible. And Guru Yoga is kind of all about this. There are different Guru Yogas. This is it's worth considering that probably for every esteemed teacher in any lineage, most likely a very high percentage of them, there is either an extant or there was a Guru Yoga practice. So they're what we call the Milarepa Soak offering. That's a Milarepa Guru Yoga. I'm just looking at, oh yes, yeah, there was one written for Boker Rinpoche. Oh yes. So this is you could say it's a common thread. You could say a method. This is a method that is a way to kind of give us a formal opportunity to really connect with in a deep way, and to orient ourselves towards the deep potential that's there in any kind of inspired connection that we feel with a teacher, to be able to access that and shift it into something that allows for the full depth, complete depth of the possibility of the relationship, and the complete depth of the possibility of the fruition for us. Some guru yogas are rather brief, and others are more extensive. Pardon me. One of the there's a comment that Trungpa Rinpoche makes in this book. This is actually a commentary on the Dorje Changtungma, which is just one piece of our Guru Yoga. And in here, he makes a comment that's applicable to both just the Dorje Changtungma, but also to the Guru Yoga as a whole in this. He says, you can approach this prayer as just a kind of a practice, a channel for connecting with that devotional quality, that openness and inspiration and connection. You can approach it purely from that perspective. You can also approach it from the perspective of this is an outline and summary of the practice. It's also a summary. It's a summary of all the elements and how to practice the most pithy elements. And if we look at the Guru Yoga overall, it's easy to find pieces that are, whereas previously in the refuge prostrations, Vajrasattva and Mandala, it's kind of like, just do it. Just do it. But in the Guru Yoga, you will find pith instructions that provide not only some instruction of what to do, but also a sense of the flavor and give the character of the pith of the practice. So there are things in there where you can look and studying those elements or exploring those and contemplating those will have a different kind of character than, say, studying about the elements in the mandala practice. It's a different flavor. This is how to place your mind. If you studied it, there are great things to be had by investigating any of the other Mundo practices. But there's some things in the Guru Yoga practice that are very particular to. These are very clear instructions about how to place your mind. How to place your mind so that Mahamudra can come to fruition.
Who wrote that commentary?
This one? Trungpa Rinpoche. And this was based on teachings that he gave back in 1974, I think. Published in 2002, but based on teachings from the early 70s. And there's some great gems in there, but there's also a fair amount of things that are kind of obscure or references to, well, if you really want to go into this, you look at these 4 books. And goodness, well, or the Mother Tantras, you have to look at the Mother Tantras for this and the Father Tantras for that. And so it's kind of the range from highly accessible comments to things like, I'm not sure that's even translated yet. So it's kind of quite a wide range, but there's some wonderful pithy things in there. So that's there's so many possibilities of things to say, but maybe by way of this being a point to shift gears, and the next thing that I want to do is actually just to go in and go through the text and look at some of the pieces. But this being a gear shifting spot, it's also a good spot for any questions, and then maybe we'll take a brief break as well after, if there are what questions people might have. Well, yes, here it comes.
I don't know if you want to talk about this here or not, but I'm always curious why we do the Karma Kagyu Guru Yoga as compared to, say, a Shangpa Kagyu Guru Yoga, Shangpa Guru Yoga.
Well, let me get the previous Kala Rinpoche on the phone and put the question to him. But you know, I'm willing to fake things and tell you what I know, kind of what my impression is. I think it's a story. One of the lamas who was on the Kala Rinpoche's translation committee, along with Lama Drupchu, Lama Ngawang. I think he's American originally. It's not from Europe in any case, but he told a story of how somebody came to Sonada and was all kind of really wanted to get the juice, had heard about the Shangpa lineage and really wanted to get the juice on that, and Lama Ngawang was there, and Kala Rinpoche said, "Oh, that's kind of disappeared. Nobody knows about that anymore," which kind of shocked him. But there is a way in which there are other comments that I've heard where, like, well, the karma for lamas who have cultivated both the practices of both lineages, and Kala Rinpoche was definitely one, Boka Rinpoche was definitely one, and both of them were. Those two were acknowledged as the primary holder of the Shangpa lineage, but they were also both acknowledged as holders fully capable of transmitting the Karma Kagyu lineage. And amongst comments I've heard, it's like, well, the Karma Kagyu practices are, that's what we teach openly. And then the Shangpa is really, that's our retreat practice. So it's, but I won't, you can just chalk that up to not anything definitive in any way, but things that are filtered through the stuff I've heard. But I don't know, there isn't, there's been no formal explanation of that. In terms of the history of the two lineages, the Karma Kagyu has had a very solid monastic, kind of widespread monastic basis along the way over the centuries. And until the late 1800s, the Shangpa lineage, the various practices of the Shangpa lineage were practiced by scattered yogis. It was kind of just a yogi practice, and that's one of the things that Jamgon Kongtrul did, was to um, connect with all the people who had various transmissions for different pieces of the Shangpa practices, different elements, and collect them again. And then created the retreat center at Sadra Rinchen Drak, which is, if you see the book on Jamgon Kongtrul's retreat manual, there's a picture on the front of that retreat center. And that's where Kala Rinpoche did retreat under Lama Karman Dondrup. Okay, you can't bail me out. No. I'm looking up to the heavens for guidance. Norbu Dundrup. The name will show up in the lineage, the extended lineage prayer here. But from then on, there was kind of a more collected carrying on of the lineage. We tend to think of lineage sort of like this singular thing. It's like it's a thing. But when we actually look, we find that there are different, there are eight, like the 8 chariots or 8 baskets of practice that came from India to Tibet. And what we consider the 4 main lineages actually have parts and pieces from all of those 8. I doubt there amongst the 4 central lineages there is any one of the 4 that doesn't have something from all 8 of those. But some of them have carried on in their own way and sort of become their own thread. But it's that's really the heart of lineage, is the passing on of practice, the passing on of the particulars of the practices within the Vajrayana, and also the kind of the pith transmission. The Dharma, there's the Dharma of the teachings and the Dharma of the realization. And so both of those are passed on. But it's not as monolithic, and certainly not at the core of it, not as institutional as we might think of it. Now, if that diversion didn't knock all the rest of your questions out of your mind, is there anything else about the kind of the general starting spot where we are here? I could have the default of thinking, I must have been so clear that nobody has any questions, but I usually go more to like, I was either so confusing or mortifyingly boring that it's made it impossible to think how to straighten out things with a question. Mm-hmm. Peter. That being a personal question.
I'm sorry. Okay.
But I would say it's a.
Well, I'll rephrase that. How does one identify their root guru?
All right. That's a more difficult question to answer. But saying it is a personal question doesn't mean I won't answer it. But just in general, marching up and asking somebody who's your root guru does start to venture into kind of personal territory, kind of a space of practice that in some ways is benefits from a certain degree of not wearing it on your sleeve. But for me, Boker Rinpoche, I would say. And the particulars of how I became clear about that, I think actually would obscure things. But it's, the notion of root guru is, that's kind of a big deal. If you could say, wow, we're just about to launch into something that's all about and nothing else except for being about root guru. But it's, I think, better to treat it as a deep and open question than to treat it as something that you can kind of nail down all four walls and put a roof on it and a door and a lock, and then you've got it. There are really two sides to it. One way that root guru is defined is the teacher who pointed out nature of mind to you, and you got it, and it stuck in a certain kind of way. And this is one way to define it. And I think it's a very useful, I found it useful to begin by offering that as opposed to this notion of this kind of abstract thing that kind of, there's this thing called root guru that's out there someplace, and if we just giving somebody a bird manual and saying, this is how you find the pileated woodpecker, it looks like this, and go out in the woods with the book, keep looking around like that until you see it. But that definition or that approach to thinking about root guru takes a lot of the kind of the certainty off of, or like I have to know what it is, and it's more a matter of about, and from that point, then it's like, how do I connect? How do I connect and go deeper in my practice? Because that creating the kind of foundation in my practice where that kind of experience and realization might actually open up, then that's something we can do something about. We can go into our practice. We can become, we can set the foundation for that. But people will, I think it's better just to think about, like, who are your teachers? Who are your primary teachers? And that becomes then a much less loaded question, way less loaded. You have a follow-up thing to add?
Well, I do. So, in terms of some of my experiences being somewhat limited, right?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I've read, I think it's Gampopa's True Ornament of Liberation.
Mm-hmm.
And, he, like anyone who might be reading these words, I think it kind of suggests that Gampopa will be looking out for you, right?
Mm-hmm.
So on some level, maybe Gampopa's like a root guru, not only for me, but for everybody.
Mm-hmm.
Kalu Rinpoche is someone else whose books I've read, but
Yeah.
I've never had the honor of meeting. I've read, a few different subjects on Nundro where it suggests if someone gives you empowerments, right? So maybe Khenpo Rinpoche is a root guru, and I think you can have more than one.
Oh yeah.
But, so I was just trying to shuffle the deck and maybe get some order to that.
Yeah. Well, what you're pointing out is there are all kinds of possible relationships with teachers. You mentioned Gampopa and the jewel ornament, via the jewel ornament, sort of a teacher via a text, and different possibilities there. And this is, in any one of those things, you could read a song of realization from Milarepa, and it would, like that. Then you'd have to say, Milarepa is my root guru. It's like, that's that's where it hit me, and something opened up there, and it is quite possible. I think Ringo Tulku talks about. He said, "Oh yes, Most lamas that I know have several root teachers." He mentioned the 16th Karmapa and Dolgo Khyentse Rinpoche, teachers from two different lineages. Oh dear, now we get complicated, but it's more open. But one of the things that, because there is a lot of pressure in some of the language, it sounds like, by gum, I'd better go get one right now. I'm going to be the Dharma student left behind the door, stuck behind the door when the root gurus get passed out if I don't get on it. And Bokar Rinpoche said, okay, I remember this was in Salagara, and I think it might have been one of the first seminars. He says, so, and part of it was just to deflate this kind of pressure and expectation. He said, so, I know many of you have read things or heard teachings where it says, you should see your teacher as the Buddha. He said, so, I want you to look and just look and ask yourself, how do you actually see your teacher? Not how you should, but how do you actually see your teacher? Do you see your teacher as a Buddha? Do you see your teacher as a Bodhisattva? Do you see your teacher as an experienced yogi, or a learned scholar, or a compassionate and somewhat experienced colleague on the path, or just a friend? Look carefully. How do you actually see your teacher? Start there. And I realized at that point that even if I wanted to join the club and declare, I see my teacher as a Buddha, I thought, would I recognize a Buddha if they walked into the room? I thought, well, this is a bit of hilarious chutzpah to say, I can spot Buddhas. Follow me. I can tell you who's a Buddha. It's kind of hilarious. It's insane. So there is a way that where they go back to, like, whoever points out the nature of mind and it kind of sticks in some way. Then you might have said, oh, I see more about this possibility of how do you actually see your teacher. If I can see something by virtue of some interchange that we've had, then I will have confidence. I'll have a different kind of confidence in a teacher that's based on actual, not some kind of faked experience, faked idea of what I should have. But this is one of the, thank you for asking the question, because this is one of the kind of the key introductory topics when we talk about Guru Yoga, is kind of how do you actually make this work, and I think I've forgotten whether it was Ringo Tulku or something that Trungpa Rinpoche said that I was reading. He said that Guru Yoga is a way in which we can take all the things that we know, and we can shift from our See, our qualified and limited appreciation for our teachers, our kind of our realistic, this is as much as I can see, this is as much as I can know, but then to shift and think about a relationship, basically a relationship with the Buddha, or the relationship with the Enlightened One. And so it's good to be able to sort of step into kind of a more, you could say, a more idealized relationship, something that is free from our ordinary perceptions, which are, and not. And in this case, what it does is it gives us some space to have a realistic relationship with our human teachers right here and now, and not feel like we have to ascribe miraculous things or degrees of purity or stability. We don't have to lay anything on. We can appreciate their qualities, and we can appreciate and put into practice those things which make sense and are alive and well, but we don't need to layer onto them some false idealism. But we can also begin to have build a relationship with that, appreciating that this is a potential. This is a potential. And if we actually experience our teacher as manifesting that potential, there is a way to kind of keep that aspect of the relationship kind of clean, and not then have to, but I saw them scream and freak out when they stubbed their toe, and it didn't seem like a big deal, but they lost it. All those kinds of things. So it's a big piece. It's a big piece of kind of stepping into this. But my sense is to the less we can kind of lay stuff on it and turn it into this giant thing, and the more we can just step into it step by step, the better off. The more realistic it will be, the more beneficial it will be for us, the more beneficial it will be for teachers in general, and the more beneficial it will be for the Dharma and the Sangha, our small and large, kind of the mini Sangha and the mega Sangha. So it's better to go step by step. Cynthia.
There's another aspect of seeing our teacher as a spiritual friend and not fully realized, because then there are more, it looks more possible for us because they're a bridge between this ideal and my merely human. And so it's nice that they can lose it if they stub their toe, because it's like, oh, this is, they're more evolved than I am, but not completely, and so it's a very human, accessible bridge, yeah, of where I'm trying to go and why I have confidence in following them, yeah.
Yeah, it's when you can look and say, well, how long did it take you to recover from that, and how did you recover from it, and sort of watch whether or not they got any better 5 years later. I'm thinking of a story when you say if they're too good, you get something else, some other kind of inspiration comes from it, but it's not that sort of thing. A story about Dilgo Khyentse, whose wife was well known for a whole variety of relationships that she had. It was quite open, sort of like, and somebody asked Dilgo Khyentse, so what do you think of all these affairs that your wife has? He says, I don't. Well, okay, well, that's kind of inspiring at one level, but it's not. probably not the response that any of us would have in a similar situation. So.
Well, first, I didn't want to make it seem like I don't have any questions, because I have like a whole list of questions. Just wasn't sure. And I'll see if after, at the end, if there's room for some of them. But in this beginning part, I'm like, I'm hearing again and again the words connect and relate and relationship. In connection to devotion. And so that's new for me, and it's piqued my curiosity, and it's making me think about what the act of relating and being in relationship is. And so as opposed to just thinking about it as following, just seems so much more active and dynamic.
Oh, yes.
To relate, and then it's relating right to the purity of mind. It's and so I don't have a complete question I can see in this moment, but I'm just sparked by this. I wonder if you could speak more about having relationship with the purity of mind through this practice.
Yeah. I hope that all the rest of what I say is actually about that one way or another. So I won't try to answer it in particular, but you used the word follow, and one of the my habit of looking in the Tibetan dictionary for random words led me to look at a phrase in the 7-line prayer for Padmasambhava, which is sometimes translated, following in your footsteps. And the more I looked at it, the more I got a sensibility that I think is not inaccurate to render something like sort of, you take the kind of frame of reference that we all, no matter what we're doing, all beings leave some kind of trace of kind of the ripple effect. And Padmasambhava and great teachers leave different kinds of, you could say, waves rippling out through interdependence. So so something came to me, it's more like, may I surf on the wave of your your karmic activity. May I surf on the wave of interdependence detected. So it's like, may I actually sort of detect and relate to that and follow that in the same way that we'd be inspired, like the beautiful wave. Just, I'm so magnetized by this example, by the heart sense of it, that just may I ride this. May I ride this. So this is, I'm now, as I usually do, talk more than there's room for. But it's a good time to take a break before you're all looking extremely uncomfortable. So we'll come back sort of whenever it seems like you're done with whatever it is that you need to do.